Olá pessoal, o gameLib entrevistou nessa semana o roteirista de games Matt Costelo, que esteve presente no evento 14º Cultura Inglesa Festival. Ele apresentou uma palestra e um curso sobre criação de games, e estes são alguns dos games em que ele trabalhou no roteiro.
Where did the inspiration come from for the seventh guest?
Well, before the seventh guest, I was a novelist, and still am a novelist. And I always like to write horror novels. The scarier, the better. I use for my novels for the seventh guest. I guess game-wise, the inspiration. I mean, the story is classic story of, even though it's a gothic horror tale, of child sacrifice. So it was a classic story of child sacrifice, but it's a very sort of gothic tale, sort of old-fashioned. And so as a novelist, it wasn't hard to come up with the story. What was interesting, I guess, and I'm trying to think where it came from, was the idea of, because I wrote the story out as a story, chopping it into fragments and then scattering it through the house. The other part of that was I'd done a book called The Greatest Puzzles of All Time, which was about puzzles and collected puzzles. So it was then coming up with the idea of a toy maker who had these puzzles in his house, and they became key to unlocking the ghosts.
He's asking if you think that the theme on the seventh guest relates to the horror film Saw, or if you find similarities.
Well, that's interesting. Because Saw is such a graphic horror film, and bloody, and Seventh Guest is not. But in a way, they share the similarity in that these people are trapped in the house, and to that extent, the house it's a human mousetrap, and Saw, of course, each Saw, it's a human mousetrap, and in Saw, the guy has a clown face. He's almost like the toy maker. I never thought that connection, but in some way, who knows?
Do you have any connection with the game's soundtrack?
I met the composer very early on, whose name's the Fat Man. Well, he calls himself the Fat Man. His real name is George Sanger. And he had already established a name for himself in some big games like Wing Commander. And his sound, the sound and music was definitely part of the atmosphere of that house.
He's saying that, well, back in those days, there were still some technological limitations to what you could do with games, and if you feel that limited you in any way, or and how has it changed now with all the advances and all the new things that you can do with technology?
Well, back then, there were a lot of people who thought that what they were trying to do, which was full motion video at 30 frames per second in a video game, running on something brand new called CD-ROM, which was brand new at that time, that it was going to be impossible, that they wouldn't be able to do it. So I already thought they were dreaming, because what they created visually went way beyond anything that existed. In terms of today, I'm doing, its new game Rage, and I'm getting very familiar with 3D game technology. Today, really, the sky's the limit. Anything's possible.
He said that a lot of the games that you've worked on were game adaptations of films. And he's asking what do you think about, there's this new trend where films will be made based out of video games.
Well, I mean, anything can be good and anything can be bad. It's easy, what it is you can make a bad game out of a great film. You make a bad film out of a great game. There are a lot of unknowns that are both in film and game. So the idea of taking a game and making it into a film is not necessarily a bad thing. And it could even be a great film. On the other hand, it could be a total failure. It really, I mean, there's so many creative, but you know, how many bad films are there, period? How many films are just not good? And same thing with games. So it's almost like the material is not as important as what's done with it, the creativity that's brought to bear.
That's a little bit for you to talk about the process of adapting, for instance, a film into a game.
It really, I mean, every time is different and depends upon how much time you have to do it and exactly how it's being produced. In the best situations, I come in early, I get to work with the screenwriters, I get to create something that stands on its own as a game, and in some cases can be as good as the film or better. You know, on the other hand, if there's things like, you know, if it comes in late and there's time pressure, it can be very different. But the process really is to try to be true to that world, to capture that world, whether it's Pirates of the Caribbean, whether it's Italian Job, whether it's G-Force, which I hear is not a very good movie. I haven't seen it, but the game I did has gotten very good reviews. So, and that's very different, that the game's gotten better reviews than the movie. So it's really a case of being able to play with the material and work with the creative team.
He wants to know if you like to play video games and what do you play and how does it feel to play a game that you've written?
Well, I do not have as much time to play games as I should. And when you spend a lot of time writing games, it's hard to make the time to play games. Games that I've seen and spent time with lately, like Heavy Rain, have impressed me a lot. And I'm very interested in new technologies, like what PlayStation is going to do with Move is very important. I started out though as an avid gamer. I knew every game coming out. I played every game. I was a game reviewer, so games were my lifeblood. And now writing and creating them is very important to me.
Do you feel there's an essential difference between writing for film or books or games?
Well, yeah. Yes, there is a difference.
Deve ser bem complicado.
The difference being, when you write a book, you open up your computer and you're alone with it for 6 months. It's you, the computer, and in your head. In a game, it's a room full of people. You're talking, interacting, you're seeing material. It's very collaborative. So the way it's done is very differently. A lot of people commenting. It feeds off the same storytelling and creative wellspring.
Okay, and so to wrap, what can you tell us? What can you pre-hash about Rage, the game you're working on?
Rage, there's a lot that's been out there that they've spoken about. The producer Tim Willits has spoken about, and so I can confirm that what he said is true. We know there's an asteroid. We know that it's set in the future. We know that it's post-apocalyptic. You've seen images of the driving sequences, the mutants. So it's a very, very different kind of world. I probably can't say any much more about it than that, except that their new engine, Tech 5, will allow many different kinds of gameplay to come in, whether it's the shooting, the adventure, the driving, in a way that I don't think has been done before. It's going to be a very exciting game to play.